When thinking about what to say today, I was struck by how prescient Susan was. So many of the critiques of politics today, echoing throughout the blogosphere, were points that Susan really foretold early on.
Remember, cut the military budget, fund community needs. This is our long-time message, and this is our time when we can involve the public. We stop destabilizing other nations, maybe we can solve the immigration problem. So we're all exhausted, but we have to just keep doing, and don't vote for the one you think is going to win the primary. Vote for somebody who might actually articulate our concerns about the war, although I know percentage last I knew was still pro-Afghanistan war. Or vote third party. But, let's use this time to be uncompromising and let the politicians do the compromising.
Seeing that we are in the setting of a religious institution, I started thinking about commandments. Of course, Susan would censure the idea of a man, Moses or anyone else, handing down do's and don'ts from on high. But she might be okay with a distillation of some of her political insights, things she had perceived years ago that are at the center of organizers' concerns today. I felt she'd want me to give voice to this part of her political legacy. 1, the corrupting power of money. Academic journals and news coverage are filled with accounts about how money, whether from campaign contributors or foundations, misshapes political action. Early on, Susan discerned that money in politics brought with it dangers, that money came with visible and invisible strings attached, and that those strings would inevitably move local groups away from grassroots organizing and toward policy positions that were more acceptable to the status quo. Triangulation. This term gained currency when a scandal-plagued Bill Clinton revived his presidency by consciously and conspicuously playing off of principled politicians and advocates on the left in order to position himself as a so-called sensible moderate who could score points with editorial boards and Republicans. And so we got welfare reform. Susan saw this dynamic at work in local and national energy politics and elsewhere, and vociferously identified this as a violation of political principle. She was fully aware that an insider-outsider dynamic structures politics. She understood that compromises were going to be negotiated by those who took up the role of inside dealmakers. But she constantly insisted that this process take place in ways that were more honest and more respectful of the indispensable contributions of the grassroots base. She recognized the value of people with principles working in electoral politics and with elected officials, and supported those who eschewed arrogance and were aware of the traps of the insider game. She disapproved of those who got carried away with the illusions of being admitted into the club and who put me politics before we politics. Susan's dedication to grassroots organizing, the outsider part of the equation, expressed her conviction that the power of a movement for change flows first and foremost, bottom up, from its strength at its base. Transparency. What Susan demanded of any political strategy was this: was anything being hidden from newly energized recruits attracted into activism? Were the means and the ends consistent and out in the open for all to examine and discuss? Did the leader's rhetoric really reflect what they said in closed-door meetings with politicians or funders. For Susan, pragmatism and its evil twin opportunism were a certain way to disillusion budding activists. Celebrity politics. Susan had very little tolerance for groups that seemed to revolve around individual leaders or egos. For her, it was the responsibility of the more experienced people in a group, the leaders, to encourage and support new activists, not to use organizational resources to launch themselves. In her judgment, top-down politics missed the whole point. That's one reason why, even though Susan was involved in more issue efforts than just about anyone I can think of on Long Island, she was rarely quoted in the mainstream press. Think about it. Certainly, she wasn't quoted in proportion to the civic contribution she made. That wasn't by accident. Susan consciously chose to put her efforts into the virtually invisible work of creating the structures and resources to enable others to become educated and equipped as activists. That was a choice she made based on her principles as a grassroots organizer. Finally, it is ironic that both Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama are now claiming kinship with the great Chicago organizer Saul Alinsky. It was Susan who brought to my attention a quote from Alinsky, which she embodied and which enabled her to radiate power and excitement about what she did. It is what inspired my 15-year-old son to ask us this summer, "Can I do what Susan Blake does when I grow up? And can I make a living doing it?" Susan burst out in that hearty laugh when I recounted that story to her, but I digress. The powerful quote from Alinsky is this: "There's no limit to what you can accomplish if you don't care who gets the credit." It's worth repeating. There's no limit to what you can accomplish if you don't care who gets the credit. It takes a great soul to live that, and Susan did. Thank you.